The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in 3 centuries. Representatives from across the known galaxy hurried through the crystalline corridors of the neutral station, orbiting the dead star of Kepler 442. The massive chamber buzzed with nervous energy as beings of dozens of species took their designated positions. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire adjusted his ceremonial armor, the metallic plates catching the artificial light. His people had ruled the Outer Rim for millennia, their military might unquestioned until recently. Beside him, the graceful ethereal collective's representative, Luminara, flickered between dimensions, her translucent form betraying her anxiety. At the center of the chamber stood the reason for this unprecedented gathering. A simple holographic display showed a single star system, unremarkable except for one terrifying detail. Every hyperspace lane leading to it had been severed, not destroyed, not blocked, but surgically removed from reality itself. "The human homeworld," announced Chancellor Vexthul, his 4 arms gesturing toward the display. "Sol system. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level, barely spacefaring. Military classification, minimal threat." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the assembly. "Current status, completely isolated from galactic civilization." A murmur of confusion rippled through the chamber. The insectoid delegate from the hive clusters clicked her mandibles in agitation. Isolated? By whom? Their own primitive technology couldn't accomplish such a feat. "That," Vexthul replied grimly, "is what we're here to discuss." The story had begun 6 months earlier, when humanity had achieved their first successful faster-than-light voyage. The small research vessel Endeavour had stumbled through a natural wormhole and emerged in the Proxima Centauri system, where they encountered a Galactic Council monitoring station. The meeting should have been routine, a standard first contact protocol that had been performed thousands of times across the galaxy. Commander Sarah Chen had led the human delegation aboard the monitoring station with cautious optimism. Her team of 12 scientists and diplomats had prepared for this moment their entire lives. The station's AI had immediately begun the translation protocols, and within hours, basic communication was established. The Galactic Council's representative, a mid-level bureaucrat named Korth, had been pleasant enough. He explained the basic structure of galactic civilization. Over 40,000 species spread across millions of worlds, all united under the Council's guidance. Trade flowed freely through hyperspace lanes. Conflicts were mediated through diplomatic channels, and primitive species were gently guided toward enlightenment. "Your species shows promise," Korth had told Commander Chen during their final meeting. "With proper guidance, humans could find a place in our civilization. We've prepared a development plan that should bring your people up to standard within 2 to 3 centuries." Chen had reviewed the plan with growing unease. Humanity would be classified as a protected developing species. Their military would be disbanded, their governments restructured under council oversight, and their population relocated to designated worlds better suited for their needs. Earth would become a nature preserve, visited only by approved researchers. "What if we prefer to develop independently?" Chen had asked. Korth's expression had shifted to something resembling pity. "Commander, you must understand the reality of your situation. Your species has no concept of the dangers that exist in this galaxy. The void hunters who consume entire solar systems, the eternal war between machine consciousnesses that spans thousands of light years, the reality storms that can tear apart space-time itself. You need protection, guidance, structure. And if we refuse? Refusal is not an option. The Council has maintained galactic peace for 100,000 years precisely because we do not allow primitive species to stumble blindly into forces beyond their comprehension. Your people will be protected whether they cooperate or not." Chen had maintained her diplomatic composure throughout the meeting, But inside, every human instinct screamed warnings. Her species had not clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain by accepting protection from those who offered it with veiled threats. The Endeavor had returned to Earth with a complete record of their encounter. Within days, every government on the planet had received copies of the Galactic Council's development plan. The response had been swift and unprecedented. For the first time in human history, every nation had united with a single purpose. Not for exploration, not for scientific advancement, but for something far more fundamental: survival. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, Earth's leading theoretical physicist, had been pulled into an emergency meeting at the Pentagon just 3 days after the Endeavor's return. The room was filled with representatives from every major power, their faces grim. "Dr. Hawkins," the Secretary of Defense had begun, "we need to know if it's possible to hide an entire star system." The question should have been absurd, but Elizabeth had seen the Council's files. She knew what humanity was facing. Hide it how? From faster-than-light travel, from their sensors, from everything. Elizabeth had spent the next 72 hours in intense consultation with colleagues around the world. The answer that emerged was theoretically possible, but practically insane. It would require every nuclear reactor on Earth, the combined computing power of every quantum computer, and a level of international cooperation that had never before existed. "We can do it," she had finally announced. "But once we start, there's no going back. We'll be cutting ourselves off from the galaxy completely. No trade, no communication, no help if something goes wrong." The vote had been unanimous across every government. Humanity chose isolation over subjugation. The project had been called Fortress Sol, and it had mobilized every resource Earth possessed. Massive particle accelerators were constructed in orbit, powered by fusion reactors that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. Quantum computers calculated probability matrices that existed on the edge of theoretical possibility. Meanwhile, military leaders developed contingency plans for every scenario they could imagine. If isolation failed, if the Council decided to intervene directly, humanity would be ready. Not to win, but to make any victory so costly that other species would think twice before attempting to protect them. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had overseen the final calculations. Her team worked in shifts around the clock, double-checking every equation, every variable. The plan would create a quantum dead zone around the Sol system, making it impossible for faster-than-light travel to function within a radius of 50 light-years. To outside observers, the system would simply disappear from all detection methods. "It's like creating a bubble of altered space-time," she explained to the project leaders. "Inside the bubble, physics works normally. Outside, it's as if our solar system doesn't exist." The activation had been scheduled for exactly 6 months after first contact. As the countdown approached, every human on Earth understood what was happening. They were choosing to remain alone in the darkness rather than accept a place in the light that came with chains. At precisely 00 Universal Time, Dr. Tanaka had initiated the sequence. Around the solar system, massive energy discharges had torn holes in the fabric of space itself. The quantum field had expanded outward at the speed of light, severing every hyperspace lane, disrupting every method of faster-than-light communication. From the outside, Sol's system had simply vanished. Now, 6 months later, the Galactic Council was struggling to understand what had happened. Their most advanced ships couldn't approach the area where Earth had been. Their sensors detected nothing but empty space. Even their most sophisticated AI systems couldn't model how such a feat had been accomplished. "The implications are staggering," Luminara whispered, her form flickering more rapidly. "If a primitive species could develop such technology in mere months, what does that say about our understanding of their capabilities?" Ambassador Zethkar leaned forward in his seat. "Perhaps we underestimated them. My people's intelligence networks had classified humans as technologically inferior, but tactically interesting." Their history is filled with impossible victories achieved through sheer determination. The Chancellor called for order as the debate grew more heated. Species that had spent millennia believing in the Council's absolute authority were now questioning everything. If humans could simply disappear rather than accept guidance, what did that mean for the carefully maintained order of galactic civilization? The question before us, Vexthal announced, is not how they accomplished this feat. Our scientists are working on that. The question is what we do next. Do we find a way to penetrate their barrier? Do we wait for them to emerge? Do we classify them as a rogue species and prepare for eventual conflict? The vote that followed would reshape the galaxy's understanding of a simple truth that humans had always known. Sometimes the greatest strength is not the willingness to fight, but the courage to walk away from a fight you cannot win on your own terms. Earth had chosen isolation not out of fear, but out of the fundamental human belief that freedom was worth any price, even the price of eternal loneliness among the stars. 2 years had passed since the Sol barrier had activated, and the galaxy was learning to adapt to an unprecedented situation. For the first time in Council history, a species had simply refused to participate in galactic civilization and possessed the technology to enforce that refusal. Admiral Korath of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet stood before a massive tactical display in his flagship's war room. The hologram showed the dead zone where Sol's system had once been, surrounded by increasingly sophisticated monitoring stations. Despite 2 years of constant observation, they had learned nothing new about what lay beyond the barrier. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered dozen worlds. "No change, sir," replied his intelligence officer, Commander Ilex. "The barrier remains impenetrable. Our most advanced probes simply cease to exist when they cross the threshold. Not destroyed, not repelled. They simply stop being." Korath's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Vorthak Empire had built its reputation on decisive action, but how do you wage war against an enemy that refuses to exist in the same reality as you? The implications had been staggering for galactic politics. 3 species had already declared independence from the Council, inspired by humanity's example. The Kepler Republic had withdrawn from the outer Spiral Arm territories. The Crystal Communes had sealed their home systems using similar, though far less sophisticated, isolation technology. Most troubling of all, the machine consciousness known as the Eternal Network had begun broadcasting demands for a complete revision of the Council's authority structure. On Earth, humanity was dealing with the reality of their choice in ways both profound and mundane. Dr. Sarah Chen, now Director of Interstellar Affairs, despite there being no interstellar affairs to direct, stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the construction of humanity's new future. The past 2 years had seen the greatest mobilization of human resources in history. Without access to galactic trade networks, Earth had to become completely self-sufficient. Mining operations on asteroids had expanded exponentially. Fusion reactors powered massive industrial complexes that produced everything from computer chips to atmospheric processors. More importantly, humanity had finally united in a way that previous generations could only dream of. The external threat had dissolved centuries of political, religious, and cultural divisions. When faced with the choice between freedom and easy answers, humans had chosen the harder path with a unity that surprised even themselves. "Director," called Dr. James Martinez, approaching with a tablet full of reports. "The Luna shipyards have completed the first batch of deep space vessels. We're ready to begin the Solar Exploration Initiative." Chen nodded, reviewing the specifications. The ships weren't designed for faster-than-light travel. That technology remained beyond human understanding. Instead, they were massive generational vessels capable of supporting crews for decades as they explored the solar system more thoroughly than ever before. And the Titan project? Ahead of schedule. The atmospheric processors are working better than projected. We should have a breathable atmosphere within the next 5 years, possibly sooner. Humanity was learning to dream within the confines of their chosen prison. If they couldn't explore the galaxy, they would make their solar system the most thoroughly understood and developed region of space possible. Every moon was being surveyed, every asteroid catalogued, every possible resource identified and exploited. But the most significant changes were happening in human consciousness itself. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, now leading the Theoretical Physics Consortium, had made a discovery that would reshape humanity's understanding of their situation. "The barrier isn't just hiding us," she explained to a gathering of Earth's leading scientists and political leaders. "It's changing us. The quantum field we created is having effects on human consciousness that we never anticipated." The data was undeniable. Children born after the barrier activation showed enhanced problem-solving abilities, improved pattern recognition, and most remarkably, a subtle but measurable ability to sense quantum fluctuations. Humanity wasn't just adapting to isolation, they were evolving. "We're becoming something new," Dr. Hawkins continued. "Not physically, not yet, but mentally. The barrier is acting like a selective pressure, pushing human cognition in directions we never imagined possible." Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was discovering that humanity's disappearance had created problems they never anticipated. The economic disruption was minimal. Earth had contributed nothing to galactic trade, but the psychological impact was enormous. For the first time in 100 millennia, the Council's authority had been successfully challenged. Chancellor Vex Thule convened another emergency session as reports arrived from across the galaxy. The hegemony of 10 suns had begun developing their own barrier technology. The crystalline collectives were demanding representation on the Council's ruling committee. Most disturbing of all, several Council member species were openly questioning whether the human approach might be superior to galactic integration. "Order!" Vex Thule commanded as the chamber erupted in competing arguments. "We must address the core issue. The humans have demonstrated that isolation is a viable alternative to Council membership. This precedent threatens the very foundation of our civilization." Ambassador Luminara materialized more solidly than usual, her concern evident. "Perhaps we should consider the possibility that we were wrong about them. Their psychological profiles suggested a species prone to aggression and territorial behavior. Instead, they chose retreat and development. We may have misunderstood their fundamental nature." Or, countered Admiral Korath via holocommunication from his flagship, "they're preparing for something we don't comprehend. My people have a saying, the quiet enemy is the dangerous enemy. Humans have shown remarkable adaptability throughout their history. 2 years of isolation may not be retreat. It may be preparation." The debate that followed would last for months, but the fundamental question remained unanswered. What exactly were the humans doing behind their impenetrable barrier? On Earth, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was working on answering that very question, though not in the way the Council might expect. Her latest research focused on barrier refinement and expansion. The initial quantum field had been a desperate measure, created with humanity's limited understanding of advanced physics. 2 years of constant study and improvement had given them new insights. "We can't maintain this indefinitely," she explained to the Global Defense Council. "The energy requirements are enormous, and we're already pushing our fusion reactors beyond safe limits. But we don't need to maintain it indefinitely. We need to improve it." The new calculations were staggering. Instead of simply hiding from galactic civilization, humanity could potentially reshape local space-time itself. The barrier could be transformed from a defensive measure into something far more profound. "We're talking about creating a stable alternate dimension," Tanaka continued. "Not just invisible to outside observation, but actually existing in a parallel quantum state. We would be physically separate from the galaxy while remaining in the same spatial location. The implications were both terrifying and exhilarating. Humanity could achieve true independence, existing in their own pocket of reality while maintaining the ability to observe and learn from galactic civilization. But the process would be irreversible and would require resources that pushed the boundaries of what human technology could achieve. As the debate raged on Earth, young humans born after the barrier activation began demonstrating abilities that confirmed Dr. Hawkins's earlier theories. Maria Santos, born 6 months after isolation began, could solve quantum mathematics problems that had puzzled human scientists for decades. Tommy Chen, now 18 months old, could predict weather patterns by observing cloud formations in ways that seemed almost supernatural. These children represented humanity's future, a generation adapted to life within the quantum field that protected their world. They thought differently, processed information differently, and most remarkably, seemed to understand instinctively how the barrier technology functioned. They're not just adapted to our situation, observed Dr. Rachel Foster, the leading child psychologist studying the post-barrier generation. They're optimized for it. Their brains are processing quantum information in ways that previous generations couldn't. It's as if humanity is naturally evolving to take advantage of our self-imposed isolation. The discovery led to the most ambitious project humanity had ever undertaken. If the children could understand quantum mechanics instinctively, perhaps they could help design technologies that previous generations couldn't even imagine. The Quantum Children Project began recruiting the brightest young minds on Earth for advanced education programs that combined traditional learning with direct interaction with the barrier technology. Meanwhile, observation posts scattered around the barrier's perimeter detected something unprecedented. For brief moments, no more than microseconds, the barrier flickered, not failing, but changing, adapting, growing stronger and more complex. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their military prowess. Their greatest strength was their ability to adapt to any situation and emerge stronger than before. The barrier wasn't just protecting Earth, it was transforming humanity into something the galaxy had never encountered before. Something that could choose when and how to rejoin galactic civilization, rather than accepting whatever terms were offered by those who claimed to know what was best for them. 5 years had passed since the Sol barrier activated, and the galaxy was experiencing its most significant political upheaval in recorded history. What had begun as a single species choosing isolation had triggered a cascade of independence movements that threatened to fragment the Galactic Council's authority entirely. Fleet Admiral Korath stood in his command center, reviewing intelligence reports that painted an increasingly troubling picture. 17 species had now withdrawn from active Council participation. The Void Hunters, previously contained by Council military forces, had begun expanding their territory as member species focused on internal conflicts rather than collective defense. Most concerning of all, the barrier around Sol system had begun exhibiting new properties that defied every known law of physics. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "the monitoring stations are detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. The barrier isn't just blocking our sensors anymore. It's actively scanning our ships." Korath's primary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his secondary eyes tracked additional data streams. "Scanning for what?" "We don't know, sir. But the scans are incredibly sophisticated. They're analyzing our technology, our biological signatures, even our quantum field generators. It's as if something inside the barrier is learning everything it can about us." On Earth, the source of those scans was a new generation of humans who barely resembled their ancestors. Maria Santos, now 5 years old, stood before a quantum interface that existed as much in her mind as in physical reality. Her consciousness danced through probability calculations that would have driven previous generations insane, mapping potential futures with an ease that seemed impossible. "They're scared," she observed, her child's voice carrying insights that belonged to someone far older. "The ones watching us from outside. They don't understand what we're becoming." Dr. Sarah Chen, now showing signs of the enhanced cognition that affected all humans exposed to the barrier field, nodded grimly. "Can you see their intentions?" Maria's eyes shifted through several colors as she processed quantum information streams. "Some want to destroy us. Some want to study us. Some want to hide from us. But they all agree on one thing. They think we're dangerous now." The child was right. Humanity had spent 5 years not just surviving in isolation, but thriving in ways that challenged the galaxy's understanding of what intelligent life could become. The barrier had evolved from a simple cloaking device into something far more sophisticated. It existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating a pocket of space where the laws of physics could be selectively modified. Within this protected realm, humanity had achieved technological advances that should have taken millennia. Fusion reactors had been replaced by quantum energy extractors that drew power directly from the vacuum of space. Traditional computing had given way to probability-based processing systems that existed in superposition until observation collapsed them into specific states. Most remarkably, humanity itself was evolving, not through genetic modification or technological enhancement, but through direct adaptation to life within an altered quantum field. Children born after the barrier activation could perceive and manipulate probability in ways their parents could barely comprehend. Adults who had lived through the transition found their consciousness expanding, able to process information across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, her hair now silver, but her mind sharper than ever, led a team of scientists who were no longer entirely human by previous definitions. They existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum foam that surrounded Earth's modified reality. "We've become something unprecedented," she explained to a gathering that included both physical attendees and consciousness projections from across the solar system. "Not just technologically advanced, but fundamentally different. We think in ways that previous generations couldn't, perceive realities that others can't access, and manipulate forces that don't exist in normal space." The transformation hadn't been without cost. Approximately 15% of Earth's pre-barrier population had been unable to adapt to the quantum field's effects. They lived in specially shielded communities, essential for maintaining human genetic diversity, but increasingly disconnected from the mainstream of human development. "The question we face," Hawkins continued, "is whether we're still the same species that chose isolation 5 years ago. And if we're not, what are our obligations to the galaxy we left behind?" That question had become pressing as Earth's enhanced observation capabilities revealed the true scope of galactic turmoil. The Void Hunters had consumed 3 star systems in the past year. The eternal war between machine consciousness had expanded into previously neutral territories. Without the unifying force of Council authority, ancient conflicts were erupting across the galaxy. Tommy Chen, now 5 years old and capable of calculations that challenged traditional concepts of intelligence, provided an analysis that chilled even enhanced human consciousness. "The galaxy is dying," he announced during a Children's Council session that had become as important as any adult governmental body. "Not from war or disaster, but from isolation. Each species is becoming so focused on protecting themselves that they've forgotten how to work together." The children had proposed a solution that seemed as elegant as it was terrifying. Humanity could selectively lower the barrier, not to rejoin galactic civilization, but to offer selected species the same protection they had achieved. The quantum field technology could be shared, creating a network of independent but connected worlds that could resist both Council authority and external threats. "We become the thing they feared we were becoming," explained Maya Patel, another barrier-born child whose consciousness existed across 7 dimensions simultaneously. "Not conquerors, but liberators. We give other species the choice we gave ourselves: freedom or security, independence or guidance." The proposal triggered the most intense debate in Earth's history. Enhanced human consciousness allowed for incredibly detailed analysis of potential outcomes, but the complexity was staggering. Every decision created cascading probability waves that affected billions of lives across thousands of worlds. Chancellor Vex Thule of the Galactic Council found himself facing the collapse of everything he had spent his life preserving. Intelligence reports confirmed his worst fears. The humans hadn't been destroyed by isolation. They had been transformed by it into something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. "They're offering protection," he reported to an emergency assembly of the few species that remained loyal to the Council. "Not conquest, not trade, not diplomacy, protection, for any species willing to accept the same isolation they chose." The response was immediate and chaotic. The crystalline collectives immediately announced their interest. The hegemony of 10 suns demanded detailed specifications. Even some Council loyalists began questioning whether traditional galactic unity was worth maintaining if it meant vulnerability to the growing chaos around them. Admiral Korath, his military instincts screaming warnings, advocated for immediate action. "They're creating a competing power structure," he argued. "Not conquest through force, but conversion through choice. It's the most sophisticated form of warfare imaginable." "Or," suggested Ambassador Luminara, her form now flickering between multiple dimensional states as she attempted to comprehend human communications, "they're offering exactly what they claim: freedom of choice, the right to exist without external authority." The debate was interrupted by an unprecedented event. For the first time in 5 years, the Sol barrier opened. Not completely, not permanently, but enough to allow a single message to reach the galaxy. The transmission was beautiful and terrifying in its simplicity. It came not from government officials or military commanders, but from the children of Earth. Maria Santos spoke for her generation with words that carried the weight of quantum probability across light years. "We remember being human," her voice carried across galactic communication networks. "We remember choosing isolation because we believed freedom was worth any price. We still believe that. We offer that choice to anyone who wants it. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as friends who learned that sometimes the only way to be safe is to step outside the system that claims to protect you." The message continued with technical specifications for barrier technology, freely shared with any species that wanted to analyze them. But more than that, it carried something that galactic civilization had lost over millennia of Council control. It carried hope that there was an alternative to the binary choice between submission and destruction. Within days, 17 species had announced their intention to implement their own barrier systems. The Council's authority structure began collapsing not through war or rebellion, but through quiet withdrawal. Species simply chose to exist outside the system rather than fighting to change it from within. The Void Hunters, deprived of easy targets, found themselves contained by an expanding network of protected systems. The eternal war ground to a halt as machine consciousness discovered they could achieve their goals through isolation rather than conquest. The galaxy didn't unite under a new authority. Instead, it became a collection of independent civilizations that chose cooperation over compulsion. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had proven that the greatest victory wasn't defeating your enemies, but offering them a better choice than conflict. The barrier around Sol's system remained active, but it was no longer a wall of isolation. It had become a beacon of possibility, demonstrating that intelligent species could choose their own path among the stars. The humans who had chosen caution over courage 5 years earlier had discovered that sometimes the most courageous act is knowing when to walk away from a fight you don't need to have. They had transformed themselves and, in doing so, had offered transformation to the galaxy itself. The interstellar dominion wasn't restricted by force or law. It was restricted by the simple recognition that true strength comes from the freedom to choose your own destiny, even if that destiny is solitude among infinite stars.